Jade nods. At least that much made sense. He hadn't meant to toy with her. He just didn't understand human feelings.
Are you two done bickering?
Seth chimes in, interrupting her thoughts. Amon nods, but Jade remains silent. She looks to each of them for a moment. Seth seemed friendly enough, and she was sure he'd be kind once she got to know him. Amon was quiet and indifferent, but he seemed to have a softer side. She felt a pain in her chest. She hadn't known either of them for very long, but she didn't like the feeling she had. Being afraid of losing a friend, feeling like you're in the way or holding someone back. Things Jade had never dealt with in the past. It was a benefit of keeping to herself, never having to consider anyone else's feelings. She was worried she'd cause even more problems for them. If Foster ever discovered her involvement with the demons, surely he'd use her to get to them, and then who knows what would happen. She could not put them in danger.
Maybe it would be safer if we just go our separate ways now.
Jade lets her gaze fall to the floor as she says this. Knowing it was the right thing to do didn't make it any easier to say. Amon looks at her in surprise. Hadn't she been upset just now because she wanted his friendship? Why did she change her mind? She didn't look like it was a choice she wanted. In fact, now she looked depressed, defeated by some unknown fact Amon could not understand.
Why?
He finally questions her. Jade closes her eyes as she replies.
I'm going to be too much trouble.
Amon shakes his head in disappointment.
How stupid are you? We are demons, Jade. Trouble is kind of our thing.
There was no way he was going to let her get away so easily, not until he could understand why he felt such a strong desire to protect her. Seth pats her head.
Hey, it's okay. We don't expect you to stay out of trouble. That'd be boring.
Seth chuckles and gives Jade a warm smile, and although she knew he was trying to make her feel better, his words only make her feel worse. She looks back to Amon, but he had turned away from her again. Only hours earlier he was cheerfully mocking her as though they'd been longtime friends. Now he seemed so far away. Jade needed to make them understand how dangerous it was to hang around her. She didn't want to chase them away, but maybe if they understood how dangerous things could be, they could avoid any problems. Then everyone would be happy.
I'm afraid of what Dr. Foster is capable of. Afraid of what he'll do to me if he finds out I helped you guys. Even more, I'm afraid of what he will do to all of you if he catches you.
Seth seems entertained by her words, but Amon keeps his back to her as she continues to speak.
Honestly, even if you're demons and even if we haven't known each other that long, I'm really happy to have met you, but I'm not willing to put you in danger in order to maintain our friendship.
Seth chuckles at this statement.
Jade, we're demons. Humans can't actually cause us harm. You're worried over nothing.
He pats her head again, trying to console her. She nods, but she isn't convinced.
Okay, if you're going to stick around, then promise me something. Promise me you won't get into trouble.
Jade's words seemed to catch the men off guard. Seth buckles, almost falling from the stool, holding his stomach as he laughs loudly, and Amon whipped around so fast she was sure he had given himself whiplash. Their reaction was not what she had expected, but at least the tension in the room had cleared. Seth questions Jade through his laughter, trying to regain his composure.
Let me get this right. For us, who are demons, to remain friends with you, we, who are demons, aren't allowed to get into trouble.
He continues to laugh loud and heartily, causing Jade to flush ever so slightly. It was a silly thought when he put it that way, demons who don't cause trouble.
That's not exactly what I mean. Just don't get caught, is all.
She tells him. Amon finally smiles as he puts a hand to his chin.
You do realize no mortal actually has the capability of capturing us.
Jade blinks a few times, perplexed by his words.
But they had Zeth and that other guy held in some glass tube. I mean, I guess he kind of broke out on his own, but...
Wait, back up. What other guy?
Seth interrupts her.
The one that just broke out. That's why Dr. Foster wanted to question me. I thought you knew.
Seth and Amon pass a glance to one another in mild confusion. They hadn't been aware another demon had been brought into the lab. However, this information answered the question of why Jade had been suspected of something. Amon sighs.
Looks like the first prince has arrived. And here I thought you were in danger because they found out you had released Zeth.
She tilts her head.
Prince.
Amon nods.
I don't think you need to trouble yourself with all the details, but Zeth and I are here to find a few demon princes. I didn't think they'd show themselves so early, but I suppose it can't be helped now.
Amon trails off in thought.
I think we need to deal with this situation, Amon.
Seth says, concern easily detected in his words.
We need to make sure they forget about us.
He looks at Jade, his concern evident.
While we're at it, we can make sure they keep Jade off their radar too.
Amon nods in agreement.
It may be necessary to deal with the prince first, depending on which it was that appeared.
He studies Jade a moment.
Then again, we can't ignore Dr. Foster and those guards. They will come back to question you soon, so this too is a rather pressing matter.
Mind tricks.
Jade interrupts his thoughts and a coy smile plays across his lips as he looks to her.
Of course, kitten. What else?
He responds, causing her to roll her eyes. Why was he insistent upon calling her by some pet name?
Kitten.
Seth looks curiously at Amon as he nods, the smile never leaving his lips.
Hasn't anyone ever told you that curiosity killed the cat?
His eyes fall to Jade expectantly, as if able to read his mind. She completes the statement.
Yes, and satisfaction brought it back.
She rolls her eyes but can't help smiling. Though she wasn't thrilled about the pet name, it did make her heart happy knowing they already shared an inside joke. Seth scrunches his face in confusion as he looks between them and gestures.
Whatever this is, it's weird, and stop it.
Jade and Amon pass a glance to each other and laugh.
All right, I can see the appeal of mocking someone.
Jade says with an apologetic look to Seth. Amon chuckles. He preferred that silly grin she gave over the disdain she wore a moment ago, though. He still couldn't understand why her pain upset him.
So, how about that coffee?
Seth says, pointing to the cups on the table, changing the subject. Jade looks to the cups and wonders how long they'd been sitting there. Most likely they would be cold by now. Even as she thought this, Amon was already solving that problem. He held his hands on either side of the 3 cups and focused a moment, allowing heat to radiate from him in order to reheat the coffee.
Heated to perfection.
He says with a smile as he hands them out. Trio enters Jade's office for a bit more privacy where they can discuss how to handle the current situation. They needed to make this facility forget they had ever seen any of the demons, as well as ensure Jade would not be in any further trouble. At the same time, they needed to find the prince who had arrived earlier and ensure he was not planning to come after Jade for seeing him. Amon groans internally, wishing Lucifer was already here, for he could make quick work of replacing mortal memories. Alas, it could not be helped. He and Seth would have to resolve the problems themselves. Amon and Seth begin to discuss how they plan to fix the problems at hand while Jade listens patiently, quietly sipping the steamy coffee. They toss ideas back and forth, debating on killing the mortals or simply erasing their memories. Convincing them that Jade had nothing to do with them was easy enough, but ensuring she wouldn't be tangled up again was the hard part. It slowly began to dawn on them that no matter what they suggested, she did seem surprised. In fact, she had very little reaction to anything that had just transpired. Amon was already well aware that Jade simply saw things in a different perspective, and she was also used to dealing with strange things in this place. Seth, however, knew none of this, and therefore her demeanor seemed inappropriate to him.
How come you're not more freaked out about all of this?
Seth questions her. Amon lets a small chuckle escape his lips. He knew this would most likely be a conversation Jade would have to repeat more than a few times once the others started appearing. Jade sighs.
In the last 24 hours I was mugged, almost raped, saved by a demon, released a dead man from some blue crap who came back to life and disappeared, only to reappear mysteriously the next morning. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention he's also apparently a demon?
Jade eyes Seth, clearly speaking about him, before looking at Amon and continuing.
You lack personal boundaries and have consistently harassed me at every opportunity. That alone is enough to drive a person mad.
With a sigh, she closes her eyes before finishing her short version of the events.
Then I'll let some weird snake guy walk out of here, which probably caused a hit mark on my head. Trust me, nothing else you guys do is going to surprise me.
Jade calmly explains as she takes another sip of coffee.
Snake guy. So he let you live.
Amon calmly says more to himself, but Seth stands suddenly at the mention of the snake guy.
We need to find him before it's too late.
Seth hurriedly tells Amon. The look of worry on his face causes Jade to become curious of the snake man.
I know this is kind of a stupid question, but is he a bad demon?
The two men look at each other and laugh a little.
He's no worse than we are, but, well, he's not as friendly towards mortals.
Seth replies. Amon nods in agreement before adding.
He's special, in his own way.
Jade considers this a moment.
Kind of like how Amon's skin can burn people.
Amon nods.
He doesn't do anything so magical though, but he is the gate to the dark realm.
Seth adds in. Jade's eyes go wide with awe.
like a gatekeeper.
The kitten thing is starting to make sense.
Zeth chuckles as Jade rolls her eyes.
Not a keeper. He's literally the gate.
Amon responds, giving Zeth a sharp look. He had not intended to tell Jade so much about the demons. Mortals had fragile minds, and too much information regarding the other realms could cause their little brains to break. Zeth drops his gaze to the floor, understanding what the look meant, but Jade is too busy thinking over the statement to notice. If the snake man was a gate and Amon could burn people, she looks to Zeth.
What power do you have, Zeth?
The two look at her with wide eyes. Neither expected her to accept the information as fact so quickly. She hadn't even flinched at the idea, but instead was curious about learning more. A moment later, Amon chuckles softly, feeling rather impressed by the way Jade had put the information together. Jade sighs, thinking she may be crossing a line with her question.
Well, whoever, or, I guess, whatever, you are, isn't important.
Zeth raises a brow in astonishment.
You really don't care who we are.
Jade smiles and shakes her head as she looks between them.
We all have secrets, right? I don't really care that neither of you aren't human. If you don't want to tell me what kind of power you have, I can respect that. After all, we've only known one another a few hours.
Her eyes fall to Amon for a moment as she recalls how quickly he had shown her his demonic form. She hadn't considered that other demons might not be as open as he seems to be.
You're both kinder than most humans I've had the displeasure of meeting, and that's all I need to know?
Amon smiles, but she notices his fist clench, though he quickly relaxes again. Jade tilts her head slightly, wondering if she'd seen it correctly. Did the thought of other people being cruel to her upset him? Or did talking about the other demons make him nervous? Not willing to let the opportunity go, however, Jade presses them for more information about the snake man.
So this snake guy thing, the gate of hell, is he a friend as well?
Friend isn't the word I would use.
Amon says and thinks a moment for the right term.
Demons aren't friends with one another. Not in the way mortals are, at least.
Jade tilts her head slightly confused.
But you came here looking for Zeth because you knew he was captured. That is something a friend would do.
Her words trail off to silence as Amon watches her with a stern expression. Zeth rubs the back of his neck, his face blushing with embarrassment.
That's a long story.
He watches Amon carefully, now more aware that he had to be careful what information he shared with Jade. Amon quickly takes over the conversation.
I needed his assistance. I wasn't aware Zeth had been released until I ran across you. He may have appeared to have been captured, but that was where he was supposed to be.
Amon meets Jade's eyes, looking for understanding. When she nods, he continues.
I was coming to meet him here. You just so happened to get here first. I wasn't coming to save a friend. I was coming to meet an associate.
Jade gives them a solemn look.
So you're just co-workers, basically. That seems really lonely.
The men seem surprised at her conclusion. Zeth places an arm around her shoulder.
Well, now we do have a friend, even if she's just a mortal, so don't think about it too much.
He smiles at her and Amon nods in agreement. She notices Zeth's touch is much colder than she expected it to be. She had just assumed they would all radiate heat like Amon did, but perhaps they all had different skins. Or maybe they are cold when they are happy or calm. Her eyes steal a glance at Amon, her mind curious if he was cold to the touch now as well. She'd been so lost in her own thoughts she didn't realize she was shivering under Zeth's touch.
Oh ha, sorry about that.
Zeth pulls away from her quickly, giving her a slight nudge towards Amon.
Let Amon warm you back up.
He says with a smile. Jade shudders. Why did he have to say it like that? Amon watches her for a moment. Mortals were so weak they couldn't even keep themselves warm. With a soft sigh, he raises a hand to her and allows a mild heat to warm her. The air around her heats up quickly. She feels her face get hot, though. She isn't sure if she's blushing, or if it's due to the heat of Amon's hand. She mumbles a thank you and catches the slightest smile on his face. A moment later, his arm falls back to his side and he clears his throat.
I think it's time to clean up this mess and get some food. You must be starving, kitten.
Zeth claps his hands with enthusiasm.
Yes, marvelous idea.
Jade glances at the clock.
I still need to take the files to the museum,
she says sadly. This day already feels too long, and a trip to the museum doesn't sound like something she has the energy for.
Then we'll get the food while you finish up here. Zeth knows this area well enough, right?
Amon says, and Zeth nods happily in agreeance. With a sigh, Jade pulls her bag from the floor into her lap, digging for her wallet and holding it out to Amon.
See you in a little while then,
she says with a sigh. Amon cocks his head curiously. He had assumed this mortal would be much more cautious, however. She seemed rather trusting of him.
You're unexpectedly trusting of me, kitten.
Her head falls to one side as she looks at him curiously. He hadn't given her a reason to not trust him.
How else are you going to get food? I can't imagine demons use human money, do they?
Amon closes his eyes with a nod, taking her wallet as the two exits the office. Amon waves over his shoulder.
We'll see you soon, and don't worry, kitten. I'll keep the food nice and hot just for you.
Jade feels her eye twitch again. Why did he have to say it like that? She glances at the clock, quickly forgetting the remark. Only an hour left before the museum would close. She huffs and grabs her brief before making her way to the museum.
Luke?
Jade calls loudly as she enters the museum. She had made it in record time. Fortunately, the museum was too far from the lab. She had cut through the woods today rather than taking the road to save time. She hears a voice call from a back room and heads towards it. She finds Luke bent over a microscope in his office room.
Good afternoon, Luke. I brought the files you wanted.
Jade says cheerfully. Luke was one of her favorite people. She couldn't really call him a friend, but he was definitely the closest thing she had. Well, aside from demons. Luke looks up from his studies with a sparkling smile.
Oh, Jade, fantastic.
He sings out.
How are you, love?
Luke asks as he takes the files from Jade.
Oh, same old same.
Jade says with a laugh. Luke smiles, looking over the files.
This is going to be a great help to my studies.
He looks up, giving Jade his full attention.
What's with you today, love? You look like you ran into good fortune.
Jade smiles.
Oh, I guess you could call it that. I made some new friends recently, so life has been more interesting for me.
Luke smiles and places a reassuring hand on her shoulder.
That's wonderful news, love. There's no better feeling than friends to be proud of.
Jade nods happily.
What are you working on?
He smiles. His sky blue eyes shine with pride. Luke loved showing off his artifacts and was always happy to do so, operating hours be damned. Jade didn't understand why he had come to her city to open his museum, but she was glad he had. His collection added a classic kind of history to her city that couldn't be found anywhere else.
Well, love, have a look. I've had this little gem for a very long time. It's quite a precious piece.
Jade stepped forward, looking into the microscope. The slide had a multitude of strange little life forms, all glowing with an amber color that reminded her of Amon's eyes. Jade felt chills through her body as she steps away, trying to conceal her nerves.
Oh, those are, interesting.
Luke raises a brow, as though taking offense to her words.
Interesting doesn't even begin to explain it, love.
He says, smiling, but his expression quickly changes to worry when he sees Jade's face.
What's the matter, love?
Oh, I'm just trying to figure out what it is.
She tries to brush up the question. The smile returns to his face.
Not a what, but a who.
His comment made no sense, but Jade felt uneasy.
After reviewing those notes, I thought you had found a new artifact. I wasn't expecting living organisms.
There was no doubt in her mind this had something to do with Amon, and she needed to warn him. The lab, and now the museum, was going to be after the demons. Luke places his finger to his lips and looks deeply into Jade's eyes.
Shush, love. This is a special prize just for me. You mustn't tell a soul about this, understand?
Jade moves back from Luke, feeling claustrophobic from his presence. He had never made her feel uncomfortable before, but she couldn't help but feel a strange presence from him now. Luke watches her with what appeared to be surprise.
Jade?
He questions her as his face scrunches in confusion. Why had it not worked on her? Luke had a strange way of being able to make people do as he wanted, but Jade seemed unaffected by his silver tongue.
Sorry, Luke. I've had a really long day. I'm a bit tired.
She laughs nervously. He slowly nods his head but still has a look of confusion on his face.
Jade, you won't tell anyone, will you? This will be our little secret.
Luke says slowly, as though his own words baffle him. Jade smiles at him.
I won't tell another human soul about it.
She did intend to tell Amon and Seth, however. They aren't humans, so technically. She was not lying. Luke's brows furrow in deep thought.
Right.
Why had Jade clarified she wouldn't tell a mortal soul? He wonders.
Well, I hate to cut it short, Luke, but I really have had a long day, so I think I'll head home now.
Luke perks back up with a smile.
Of course, love. I understand. Let me drive you home.
Luke offers, hoping to pick her brain a little more over the oddity of her statement, but Jade quickly shakes her head.
It's okay, but thank you. I actually have to go back to the office for a few things before going home. I don't want to bother you.
Jade says, already halfway out of his office. Luke waves to her with a smile, but his expression drops to a more serious one as soon as Jade is gone.
She sure is an interesting one,
Luke says out loud to himself. A short while later, Jade returns to find Seth spinning in a lab stool.
Oh, hey, you're finally back.
Seth says, greeting her with a bright smile. She smiles back as she looks around, but Amon is missing.
Where did Amon go?
Seth shrugs.
I kinda lost track of him in the city.
Jade frowns. How was she supposed to tell Amon about Luke if he disappeared? Seth pokes her arm.
Did you hear me?
Jade snaps back to the moment.
Sorry, I was just thinking about something.
Oh, well, I was just saying not to worry. Amon is a big boy, he can handle himself.
Seth laughs.
Yeah, I guess.
She says with a half-hearted shrug. He smiles again.
Do you still have work to do? I can help you.
He offers.
Thanks, Seth. I'm done for the day, though.
At least Seth was still here. He didn't seem worried about Amon's disappearance, so for now, Jade wouldn't worry either.
Great. Then we can go home.
Seth says, clapping his hands together. Jade nods and grabs her things.
What about Dr. Foster?
She questions him as they exit her office. Seth places his hands behind his head and sighs.
We took care of it already. Don't worry, no one here will remember anything about any demon and they won't come after you either.
She lets out a sigh of relief, thanking Seth for his help.
I had nothing to do with it. Amon did all the work. Really, I've never seen him work so hard. Normally he makes Lucifer do all the mind wipe.
Seth suddenly clasped his hands over his mouth. He'd exposed another secret about the demons. Jade simply nods, as though not surprised at all.
Ah, so then, you do all have different abilities? That's what I thought, but Amon wouldn't give me a straight answer when I asked him earlier.
She closes her eyes and shakes her head.
Is he always like that? The riddles and whatnot.
Seth can only stare at her a moment, astonished that she simply accepted his words and rather than freaking out over it, like one may think a mortal would do, she was actually maintaining a normal conversation. He suddenly begins to laugh. Amon was definitely right about her being entertaining. When he recovers a moment later, he pats her shoulder.
You're very interesting, you know that.
He smiles at her and she briefly feels irritation, as she wonders if Seth too would brush away her question. But to her surprise, he does actually answer her.
No, it's not that he speaks in riddles. He's just worried your brain will explode if he tells you too many things at once.
Seth loops his arms with hers as he charges forward and down the steps of the lab, heading for Jade's home.
Don't worry, you'll understand it all soon enough. Anyway, we should get moving. Amon is probably waiting for us.
He drags her along, questioning her every few minutes for directions. He gives her no room to argue or question him as he pulls her along.
Wait, Seth.
Jade tries to pull against him to stop him. Seth pauses his march, looking down at her with a raised brow.
When you said, we can go home, do you plan to stay with me too?
Seth smiles brightly.
Well, if you insist, then, yes.
He lets out a small giggle.
I don't think there's enough room.
Jade says, but Seth ignores her, trudging forward once more. Jade had tried several times to halt Seth in his tracks, but failed. He was much stronger than he appeared, despite his thin frame. He was shorter than Amon, but still taller than she was. Every now and again he'd glance down to her with those sparkling blue eyes and smile. His sandy blonde hair was like a puffy cloud, silver lining included. Jade couldn't help but wonder if it was as soft as it looked. He must be rather young. Most of his actions seemed childlike to her, but it sort of added to his charm. He smelt like the sea, in an odd sort of way. He made her feel calm, much like the feeling you would get while watching the waves roll in and out. He wore a hooded jacket now, so she couldn't feel the coldness of his skin. She was still greatly curious what his ability was. Amon was hot like fire. This snake guy was a gate. Seth was cold, and he smelt like sea. So maybe he could control water. She inhales deeply, letting go of her thoughts. Eventually, she gave up trying to get him to stop and watched his fluffy blonde hair wave in the wind as he drags her ever closer to her apartment. Seth releases her arm as they approach the stairs leading to her apartment, but she stops to watch him. The landlord wasn't going to be happy about her having guests over suddenly.
You gonna just stand there all day?
Amon questions from the balcony, breaking her train of thought. Jade looks up to see him draped over the edge of the railing, an expression of boredom plastered over his face. Half surprised and half happy to see him, Jade can't help but smile and hurries up the stairs with Zeth.
Hey Amon. See Jade, told you he'd be waiting for us.
Zeth says happily, waving to Amon.
Zeth said you got lost. I was kind of worried.
Jade starts to explain, but Zeth cuts in, playfully shaking his hands in a mock fretful tantrum.
Oh, you hear that? She was worried about you.
Amon raises a brow.
Sweet little kitten. Don't fret. I'm safe and sound, but it's adorable you'd worry for me.
Jade feels her face get hot with embarrassment.
That's not what I was concerned with.
The two men give her accusatory stares, only adding to her reddening face. Why did Zeth have to make things awkward? Didn't he know he was going to give Amon the wrong idea? It had nothing to do with him being lost. She had only wanted to tell Amon about what she had seen in the museum. Now, thanks to Zeth, another weird awkward moment of confusion passed through her. Was Zeth trying to make Amon think she liked him?
I was worried because I had something important to tell you, and you had disappeared.
Amon tilts his head, wondering if Jade was concerned the food would get cold if he waited too long. He holds a bag in front of her face with a smile.
Don't worry about it. I kept the food hot.
Her mouth falls slightly ajar. Did he actually think that's what she was worried about? After a moment of awkward silence and a weird stare down from Amon, he finally speaks again.
So, you going to open the door, or what?